They say you can't fight City Hall. They never said anything about the homeowner association. And trust me, those folks are worse. It started with boots on my gravel, 6 of them to be exact. 5 men in matching blue vests, clipboards in hand, and one in a suit like he walked straight out of a courtroom and onto my lawn. No knock, no warning, just open my gate and march right in like they owned the place. I was halfway through sanding a piece of cedar on my porch, heard the crunch of gravel and looked up. One of them was already halfway to my well pump, another pulling out his phone to record. I stood up slow, wiped the sawdust off my jeans, and grabbed the shotgun leaning by the doorframe. Now, before you get any ideas, I didn't point it, didn't chamber around, I held it low, barrel down. Like I said later, it was more of a punctuation mark. "Step off my property," I said. The guy in the suit didn't blink. "We're conducting a compliance inspection. This land falls under HOA jurisdiction." "No, it doesn't," I said. "Never has." Funny thing is, that's when the guy next to him pulled out a badge. County Sheriff's Office, said I was interfering with an official investigation. And just like that, click. Cold steel around my wrists. That's how this mess began, with me face down on my own porch, cheek against the wood I laid myself, while some clipboard warrior filmed the whole thing like he'd just brought down a fugitive. You ever had that moment where your life stops feeling like yours? That was it for me. Watching them walk through my workshop, stepping over tools, peeking inside the storage shed, like I didn't exist. Let me back up a second. The place I live, it's mine, paid off in full. Built it from scratch on the edge of the old pine belt, where the HOA boundaries end. When I bought it 15 years back, there wasn't a sign of regulation for a mile in any direction, just trees and freedom. But you let time pass and suburbs creep like mold. One subdivision turns into 3. Then they pave the old access road and boom, suddenly I'm on adjacent land. That's their term, adjacent. Not inside, but close enough to bother. A week before the raid, I'd gotten a letter. Plain envelope, no return address. Just said I was in violation of homeowner standards, unauthorized structures, unapproved utilities, and, get this, non-compliant landscaping. I laughed, tossed it, thought it was a mistake. Guess who wasn't laughing when they slapped those cuffs on me? Down at the station, the same suited guy sits across from me. He's HOA's legal rep, apparently. Talks like a game show host. Smiles when he tells me I'll be facing charges for brandishing a weapon, trespass denial, and failure to comply. I ask for a lawyer. He slides a packet across the table. Settlement offer. Agree to vacate and we'll drop the charges. Vacate. My land, my home, my sweat and blood. I stared at him long enough he got nervous. "You should take it," he said. "You're not going to win this." And that's when I realized this wasn't about compliance. It was about pushing me out. Stick around. It only gets worse from here. When they let me out the next morning, I came home to yellow tape and a red notice stapled to my front door. Restricted access, pending review. Like I was some kind of public hazard. I stood there on the gravel, still in the same clothes, holding a brown paper bag with my belt, wallet, and keys. Keys to a house I wasn't allowed to enter. You ever stood outside your own home and felt like a stranger? That's a special kind of hell. Couple neighbors watched from across the street. No waves, no hello, just arms folded, curious eyes behind drawn curtains. One of them was Linda, a woman who used to bake cookies for me every Christmas. She turned her face when I looked her way. Guess once the HOA paints you dangerous, folks stop seeing the man and start seeing the label. I spent that night in my old truck, parked at the bottom of the hill. Seat doesn't recline right, but it's better than a cell. I watched the house through the windshield, waiting for someone to come back. And you know what? They did. Around midnight, a white SUV with tinted windows pulled up. Same suit from before stepped out, phone to his ear, pacing in my driveway like he owned the damn place. Then another man joined him, looked like some tech contractor. They opened my side gate and went around back with a flashlight. I almost got out to confront them, but something told me to wait. Watch. Let me tell you, nothing feels worse than knowing someone's walking your land like it's theirs, and not being able to stop them. Next morning, I called the county office, asked them point blank if my land was under HOA jurisdiction. Lady on the phone hesitated, said it was under review due to recent zoning adjustments. That's bureaucrat speak for, we don't want to get involved. So I did what any stubborn old man would do. I drove straight to the HOA headquarters, little building tucked between a nail salon and a vape shop. Inside, white walls, fake plants, two smiling women in pastel blouses who looked like they'd never worked a shovel in their life. I need to speak with your president, I said. Do you have an appointment? The blonde asked. No, I said, but I've got a problem you created. She offered me a seat. 10 minutes later, in walks Karen. Now, I didn't know her name then, but I knew the type. Late 40s, power walked in like she ran the Pentagon, floral blouse too tight at the buttons, eyes that scanned like a barcode reader. You must be Mr. Granger, she said. Smiled like a cat watching a bird. You must be the woman stapling lies to my front door, I replied. Her face didn't even twitch. We sent multiple notices. You sent one, with no signature, no contact. Then you sent people onto my land without permission. She tapped a folder. Your property is now considered under administrative overlap. We're within our rights to inspect and enforce compliance. Then sue me, I said. But send another goon onto my land, and it won't be a clipboard I meet him with next time. That's when her smile dropped. She reached for a button under the desk. Probably security. I stood up and walked out before things escalated. You ever deal with someone who smiles while they screw you over? That's Karen, the kind who calls the cops and cries on cue. Back in the truck, I called someone I hadn't talked to in over a year, my daughter. Annie, I said, I might need you to come home. She was quiet a beat too long. Then, is it the house? It's everything. She arrived 2 days later in a dust-covered rental, looking too thin and too tired. College had hardened her. But when she stepped onto that gravel and saw the tape, her face tightened. They really locked you out? Not legally, I said, but close enough. That night we sat in the truck, her legs curled up under her, flipping through a box of old documents I'd stashed years ago, original property lines, tax receipts, builder's maps, and then she stopped on something. Dad, she said, tapping the corner of one page. This is a deed from 2009 with a grandfather clause, exempt from all surrounding developments. I leaned closer. That was before they paved the road. Exactly, she said. If they rezoned after that, it shouldn't apply retroactively, but this only works if it's still recorded with the county. Hope's a funny thing. It doesn't roar. It whispers, quiet, persistent, dangerous. If this holds up, she said, we can push back, legally. I looked at her, my daughter who used to bring me iced tea in a dinosaur cup while I painted the fence. Let's make 'em regret picking this fight, I said. Because right then and there, I wasn't just fighting for land, I was fighting to remember who I was. And what came next? Well, let's just say the HOA never saw it coming. I woke up to frost on the windshield and stiffness in my back that reminded me I wasn't 20 anymore. Annie was already up, sitting on the tailgate with a cup of gas station coffee, flipping through more paperwork. We need that clause recorded and certified, she said. If it's not in the system, it doesn't exist. I nodded, stretching my legs. Then we take it to the courthouse. Half an hour later, we were standing in the dusty county archives, watching a clerk named Betty squint at the document through thick glasses. And this deed's old, she said, flipping pages. Like typewriter old. But it's real, right? Annie asked. Betty glanced up. It's real, but it's not digitized. And if it wasn't recertified after the zoning redistricting, it's considered inactive. I leaned in. Inactive doesn't mean invalid. Betty gave a tired shrug. You'd need to refile and request a historical property hearing. How long would that take? 6 to 8 weeks. That was the first punch to the gut that morning. As we stepped out into the cold air, Annie turned to me. We don't have 6 weeks. By then, they'll bulldoze the place. She was right. They'd already won in the court of public opinion. Every day I sat outside that fence, people drove by slow, staring like I was the town's cautionary tale. That night, I sat staring at the fire pit I used to light for neighbors every 4th of July. Now, not even smoke could cross that boundary line. You know what that does to a man? I needed a new play, fast, and not the kind you pull from a rule book. Let's bait them, I said. Annie raised an eyebrow. Bait them how? We make 'em think I'm giving up, putting the place on the market. She was quiet for a second. You think they'll take the bait? If this is about grabbing the land, they will. Next morning, I printed a for sale sign and stuck it right outside the gate. Annie mocked up a fake Zillow post using photos from years ago, made the place look like a neglected wreck. Needs full renovation, she typed. Owner desperate to sell, no inspections. Then we waited. Didn't take long. 2 days later, another SUV rolled in. Different guy this time. Skinny, slick, with a Bluetooth earpiece and shoes too clean for real estate work. Walked the perimeter like he was already planning where the fence would go. Annie filmed from the truck. I stayed out of sight. That night, the listing got 14 inquiries, most traced back to shell accounts. I smelled something. Corporate. Hidden hands. Still think this is about landscaping violations? I muttered. She shook her head. This is bigger. They want this land for something. We needed eyes and ears, and I knew just the guy. A bartender named Cliff, I'd known since the old logging days. Ran a side hustle in freelance surveillance. Don't ask how. He owed me a favor. 2 nights later, Cliff's camouflage trail cams went up on the trees near the backside of my property. Places the HOA would never think to check. And oh boy, did those things catch gold. They came back, this time at 2:13 in the morning. Flashlights, a man with surveyor tools, another one digging near the edge of the tree line. Annie and I watched the footage in silence. She paused on a frame where one guy was marking something with red tape. They're mapping utility access, she said. They're not trying to kick you out for violations. They want to develop the land. And they can't if I stay. That night, something shifted in me. I wasn't just some old man clinging to his land. I was a roadblock, a threat. You ever realize someone's not trying to punish you? They're trying to erase you? And that lights a fire deeper than rage. I turned to Annie. We need to go public, but not with facts, with story. She frowned. You mean like social media? I nodded. But we don't call out the HOA. We make it about a man losing everything he built, about family, about justice, and we let people fill in the blanks. She got to work. Next morning, a video went up. Me and Annie sitting in the truck, talking about the house, the history, the fight. No names, no accusations, just emotion, just truth. Within hours, it hit 50,000 views. By evening, 100K. People from all over were commenting, sharing, asking questions. One comment stuck with me. This feels like my dad's story. Stand strong. You ever feel 1,000 strangers push you back to your feet? I did. But we weren't done yet. Because what came next would turn that spark into a wildfire. The day after the video went viral, I found a fresh set of boot prints in the mud near the back fence. Not mine, not Annie's. Someone had been snooping. Then came the knock. I opened the truck door to see 2 deputies standing there, different ones this time, younger, nervous. One of them held a folded paper in his hand, the other avoided eye contact. Mr. Granger, the taller one said, we've been asked to serve you with this. I took the paper. Civil notice. The homeowner association had filed a motion for a permanent injunction, claiming I was endangering the community, inciting hostility, and obstructing development plans. Inciting. That's a hell of a word for telling the truth. I looked the deputy in the eye. You boys ever get tired of delivering someone else's lies? He didn't answer. They left without another word. You ever feel the ground shift under you? Not suddenly, like a fall, but slow, like a tremor that never ends. That's what this felt like. Constant pressure. Every hour, some new trick, some new angle. Annie was already pacing when I got back to the truck. They're trying to drown you in paperwork, she said. Death by 1,000 filings. I nodded. Then we changed the game. She looked up. How? We let them think they've won. That night, I went radio silent, took down the video, packed up the trail cams, no posts, no noise. 2 days later, I drove out with a U-Haul, backed it halfway into the driveway. Let the neighbors see, let Karen see. From the corner of my eye, I saw her step onto her porch, phone in hand, watching like a hawk. Annie played along, boxes in hand, head low. But inside that trailer, nothing but air, all show. Next morning, I called the county zoning office again. This time, I didn't ask for information. I asked for a name, the name of whoever filed the zoning proposal that triggered this whole storm. They hesitated, then gave me one. Gerald E. Washburn. I didn't recognize the name, but Annie dug deeper. Turns out Washburn was no official. He was a contractor, owned a small company that had just secured a deal to manage green space to utility transitions for the HOA. A week before the inspection raid, his name appeared on a revised development plan, one that listed my land as pending acquisition. Pending, like it was already decided. They sold your land before they even took it, Annie said, holding the document. I clenched my fists. They think I'm a problem. What if I become a liability instead? She blinked. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we use their own greed against them. That's when I called Cliff again. I need a favor, I said. Big one. Cliff laughed. Bigger than trail cams? Way bigger. I handed him the fake listing. Make it real, but not for sale. Make it seem like I've already sold it, quietly, under the table, to someone they really don't want next door. His grin widened. You want to scare 'em? No, I said. I want to make 'em panic. Over the next 48 hours, Cliff worked his magic. A shell corporation was formed, complete with fake website, vague LLC address, and rumors planted through community forums. Industrial buyer, possible low-cost rehab center, maybe even a recovery halfway house. By Thursday, HOA inboxes were blowing up. Residents wanted answers. Karen called an emergency meeting. And Annie? She walked into that meeting like she belonged there. Press badge in hand, freelancer cover, totally legit, and a camera running. I watched the footage that night. Karen stood in front of a folding table, trying to explain to 50 angry neighbors why the association had apparently sold land for a purpose nobody approved. This was not finalized, she barked. There has been a misunderstanding. A man in the back yelled, Why is it marked pending in the county file then? That's the thing about lies. They unravel fast when the wrong people believe them. Karen tried to regain control, but the room was turning. Faces that once sneered at me were now red with confusion and fear. And just when it hit boiling point, Annie asked a question. Did you, or did you not, authorize Gerald Washburn to designate private properties for development without informing the homeowners? Karen froze. That freeze, that 2-second pause, that was the crack, the moment when the mask slipped. Because sometimes all you need is one question to split the dam. And brother, the water was about to come crashing down. Karen blinked, once, twice. That courtroom smile she'd always worn, gone. Her jaw flexed like she wanted to chew the words before spitting them. I can't speak to that without legal counsel, she finally said. The room exploded. You ever seen a mob turn polite? That's what this was, murmurs, but deadly ones. HOA board members exchanging looks, people flipping through handouts, some standing up and walking out mid-meeting. They smelled smoke, and they weren't about to burn with her. Later that night, Annie and I sat in the truck, laptop on our knees, watching the replay. She paused the video, right at the moment Karen's face broke. You see that? She said. That's the end of her grip. I shook my head. No, that's just her regrouping. Because here's what they don't tell you about people like Karen. They don't lose. They stall. They distract. They buy time to reload. And I was damn sure she'd be coming back swinging. Sure enough, the next morning, I got a certified letter. Return address, HOA Legal Division. Inside, a notice of hearing, civil suit against me personally, filed for defamation, coordinated sabotage, and interference with municipal operations. Defamation, sabotage. I looked at Annie. Guess they finally used all the real rules and moved on to fake ones. She didn't laugh. We need help. I don't do lawyers, I said. You don't have to. You just need someone who hates these people more than you do. That's when she called her old college friend Brooke, former law student, now a paralegal who'd spent the last 3 years swimming through HOA lawsuits for underpaid clients. She owed Annie a favor, and more importantly, she had dirt. Brooke showed up that evening in boots, jeans, and a satchel full of nightmares for the HOA. These people get cocky, she said. They use templates, file fast, dirty, and assume nobody pushes back. But I've seen 5 of their cases dismissed this year alone. And this Washburn guy, He's already under quiet audit for backroom zoning proposals. Annie lit up. Can we prove a pattern? Brooke nodded. We don't even need to. We just need to make them flinch. Over the next few days, the three of us got to work. Brooke drafted a counterclaim, focused not on damage, but on process, violations of due notice, coercion of jurisdiction, use of law enforcement without property warrants, each point written like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. We didn't go public with it. We leaked it. Local real estate forums, a quiet tip to a regional housing newsletter, a Reddit thread titled, "Can Your HOA Seize Your Land Through Zoning Tricks?" Within 48 hours, the county board was fielding press inquiries. My face showed up blurred on the evening news, and Karen, she issued a statement. A regrettable misunderstanding with a valued member of our community. That phrase, valued member, almost made me laugh out loud. But the real blow came 2 days later. A county official, not HOA, showed up on my property, unannounced, clipboard in hand, but this time polite, alone. "Mr. Granger," he said, "we'd like to schedule a formal review of your land classification. Would that be acceptable?" I stared at him for a moment. "You're asking, not barging in?" He smiled awkwardly. "Yes, sir." Annie watched from the truck, arms crossed. She mouthed, "He's scared." And maybe he was. Maybe they all were. Because people like Karen don't operate well in daylight. They need silence, compliance, quiet corridors. We were making noise now. But it wasn't over. Not by a mile. Because that hearing, it was coming fast. And if you think I'd let them corner me in a courtroom without a final card to play, well, friend, you don't know me yet. The courthouse looked like every small-town courthouse in America. Faded brick, busted vent fans, a flag that needed ironing. But the tension in the air? You could cut it with a putty knife. I wore my cleanest shirt and an old denim jacket with the sleeves starting to fray. Annie walked beside me, chin high, like she was marching into battle. Brooke trailed us, eyes glued to her tablet, lips muttering statute numbers like incantations. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than outside. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal pantsuit, freshly dyed hair, papers fanned out like playing cards. Beside her, the HOA's shiny lawyer, too young, too smug, and too eager to win. He smiled at me like I was a warm-up round. "You ready?" Brooke whispered. "Born ready," I said. "But if I go out, I'm taking someone with me." Judge was a middle-aged man named Reynolds. Looked bored, but the kind of bored that can snap fast if you insult his time. Karen's lawyer started strong, talked about community values, property standards, dangerous behavior, showed a screenshot of me holding the shotgun, left out the part where they walked onto my land without warning. Then he said it. The defendant orchestrated a media campaign to defame our association and disrupt essential infrastructure planning. I almost laughed. When it was our turn, Brooke stood up, quiet, calm, surgical. She didn't attack, she asked questions, questions that cut deep. "Did your clients notify Mr. Granger in writing prior to inspection?" Silence. "Did they possess a legal warrant to enter the property with video equipment?" More silence. "Was Mr. Washburn authorized to file zoning intentions before obtaining ownership?" Karen shifted in her seat. And then Brooke dropped the hammer. She handed the judge a printed email thread. One Gerald Washburn accidentally CC'd to a local developer. In it, he refers to my land as secured for Phase 1, pending extraction of current occupant. Extraction, like I was a root canal. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain this terminology?" Karen's lawyer objected. Overruled. The tension turned suffocating. Karen didn't look so clean anymore. Her mascara was starting to smudge. After a recess, the judge called both parties to chambers. We waited outside. 10 minutes, 20, 45. Then the door opened and the bailiff called my name. Inside, Judge Reynolds leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. "Mr. Granger, the HOA has agreed to drop the civil suit. In return, you'll agree not to pursue damages." Brooke started to speak, but I raised my hand. "No." The judge blinked. "No." I stood up. Dropping a fake case doesn't erase what they did. I don't want money. I want a correction. On record, in writing, public. Karen's lawyer scoffed. "That's not standard procedure." Neither is armed escort onto private land without notice, I said. Reynolds looked between us, then nodded slowly. I'll issue a ruling, statement of improper process, and I'll instruct the county to reclassify your property outside HOA purview, permanently. I turned to Karen. You lose, not because I outspent you, not because I outplayed you, but because you mistook silence for surrender. She didn't say a word. Back outside, Annie hugged me so tight I thought she'd crack a rib. We did it, she whispered. But I didn't smile. Because when you survive something like this, it doesn't end with a gavel. It ends when you finally sleep without looking over your shoulder. That night, back in the truck, I watched the wind move through the trees and wondered, how many other folks got pushed out and never made it this far? And how many more were still fighting, with no one to listen? You still with me? Then listen close. This story ain't over just yet. A week passed. No more notices on my gate. No more footsteps in the gravel at night. No more fake inspections or men with clipboards pretending they belonged. The silence was loud, but it wasn't peace. Not yet. You see, after the courthouse ruled in my favor and kicked the homeowner association off my back, I expected celebration, relief. Maybe a beer on the porch with Annie, watching the sun bleed over the treetops. But what I got was something else. It started with the mailbox, bent sideways one morning like someone kicked it on their way past. Then the neighbor across the road stopped waving. The folks who used to chat with me about fishing now turned their heads like I didn't exist. Karen might have lost in court, but her poison ran deeper than rules and bylaws. I was no longer the problem. I was the reminder, the man who said no and didn't back down. And that makes people nervous. Annie saw it first. They're isolating you, she said one morning, pointing at the pile of flyers that used to be hand-delivered, now tossed at the gate. I don't need them, I muttered. Never did. That's not the point, Dad. She was right, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Instead, I went back to work on the porch, fixing the banister, repainting the siding, putting things back the way they were before the storm rolled in. And that's when I found it. Tucked behind the propane tank, where only someone snooping would bother looking, a small black box, no bigger than a cigarette pack, smooth plastic, lens in front. A camera. I didn't say a word, just brought it to Annie and set it on the hood of the truck. She stared. You think it's from the HOA? No, I said. I think it's from someone who's still playing. That night, Cliff came by with his scanner, took one look and nodded. Transmits on a low-frequency loop, he said. Basic, cheap. Whoever planted this didn't want data. They wanted intimidation. So they're still watching, Annie whispered. I picked up the camera and crushed it in my fist. Let 'em watch dust. But inside, I was rattled. You ever win a war and still feel like you're walking through a minefield? That's where I was. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name and a wax seal on the back. Inside, a single sheet of paper, printed, anonymous. You think this is over, but you only won the vote, not the board. The rest of us are still here. It wasn't signed, but the message was clear. Karen was gone, but her influence still very much alive. So I made a decision. I went to the next HOA meeting. Walked in, slow, calm, in the same denim jacket I wore in court. The room got quiet. New faces on the board, same folding tables, same coffee-stained sign-in sheet. But the tension, palpable. I didn't ask to speak. I didn't raise my hand. I just stood in the back and watched. Halfway through, someone finally broke the silence. You here to start more trouble, Granger? I smiled. No, just making sure the rules you love so much apply to everyone. And then I walked out. Sometimes presence is louder than protest. Back home, Annie sat on the steps. Well, she asked. They flinched, I said. She smiled, but it was tired, like both of us knew. This wasn't the end, just the quiet between storms. Still, for the first time in months, the wind through the pines sounded like something close to peace. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling. Like there was still one more card they hadn't played. And sure enough, that final card came sooner than I expected. It came on a Sunday. I was chopping wood when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate, like someone wanted to be noticed. An SUV I hadn't seen before pulled up near the edge of my gate. Black, tinted, government plates, the kind that say, "We're not here for tea." Door opens, out steps a man in a navy sport coat, tie loose like it had been a long drive. Not HOA, not a neighbor, no clipboard, no badge. He looked around like he expected someone to be watching. "You Granger?" I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Depends who's asking." He smirked. "Name's Harlan. I work with municipal oversight. We've had some questions about zoning requests submitted under your area last spring." I stared. "You're about 6 months late." "Yeah," he said. "Funny thing, every file tied to Washburn's name got pulled last week. Scrubbed. Like someone didn't want it traced. Only one parcel still had a physical paper trail." He pulled out a folded sheet and handed it to me. A map. My land. With a red dotted line through it labeled Stage 1 Utility Conversion. "I thought this was over," I muttered. "It is, for you," he said. "But it's just starting for everyone else." Then he gave me a card. "If anyone comes asking questions, don't answer. Just call me." And with that, he drove off. Annie stood behind me the whole time. I didn't even hear her come up. "You believe him?" she asked. "I don't think it matters. Because here's what I've learned. When people in suits start cleaning up, it means someone up the chain finally smelled the rot. Doesn't mean justice, doesn't mean closure, just means someone important realized there's a mess to mop up." Later that week, the board held another emergency meeting. I didn't attend. Didn't have to. Word spread on its own. Karen's replacement resigned. Washburn's company went offline. And the county quietly announced a moratorium on all development in the surrounding parcels, pending investigation. You know what I did? I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, and watched the wind move through the trees. No noise, no sirens, no trucks. Just stillness. Sometimes victory doesn't look like a headline. Sometimes it's just quiet. Annie left a few days later, hugged me tight, said she might write about all this someday. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. Some stories don't need to be published, just lived. Before she left, she asked, "Do you regret standing your ground?" I looked out at the pine trees, the gravel path, the scar on the porch where my face hit wood the day they cuffed me. "No," I said, "I regret not standing it sooner." And that's the thing, isn't it? They came with papers, with cameras, with suits and lies and masks. I met them with truth and a shotgun. This is Karenology. And if you're still here, maybe hit that like button. Or better yet, stand your damn ground when it counts. Because nobody else is going to do it for you.